Hi, everybody. We're going to get started. Thank you all for coming. My name is David Viorst. I'll be your host. I'm the co-chair of the Washington, D.C. chapter of the Internet Society. Are all of you familiar with the work of the Internet Society? If you are, raise your hand. All right. Could you guys talk to everybody that didn't raise their hand? The Internet Society is a global organization that basically fights for the future of the internet. And we carry out that mission in Washington, D.C. We hold panels regularly on key topics about internet policy and internet technology, and our community is growing constantly. We welcome you all to join in our activities. You can find us online at www.isocisoc-dc.org. We certainly welcome new participation. The Pathfinder project, for which you are here today, is a joint venture between our chapter, the Public Interest Registry, and one of the constituencies of ICANN that represents nonprofits. The objective is to expand internet technology resources so that nonprofits can better accomplish their missions and help to actually advance social good in the world. The kind of hidden agenda, the subtext, is that people who are involved in internet governance and internet policy feel strongly that the nonprofit and civil society sectors need to be more actively engaged in some of the decisions on the horizon that will impact the future of the internet. And there's a lot of things going on. So by holding events like this and by organizations that you're going to hear from today, we hope to kind of bring these two communities together, because the future of the internet, it's not a given. And there's a lot of important decision points on the immediate horizon. And we hope we can help to make more people aware of that, because we feel that the nonprofit community and the civil society sector has a large stake in this, and their voice and voices from those areas need to be heard. We have a great program for you today. Unfortunately, one of our panelists called in and has the flu, and I told him to stop sneezing and get some rest, and we would take care of it. We have an amazing panel today. We have my good friend Rory McKenna from Care2. Care2 was founded in 1998 with a simple mission to help make the world a better place. Care2 is a highly engaged social network of over 34 million citizen activists standing together for good and making extraordinary impact, locally, nationally, and internationally, largely by working in solidarity on petitions and pledge campaigns. Our second speaker will be Roshani Kothari, and she's with D-Tree International, and she's going to talk about how D-Tree International leverages mobile technology to save lives by empowering frontline health workers to diagnose, treat, and follow up with patients more effectively. And our third and kind of keynote panelists are Mark Noel and Mike Rafferty from 501c Tech. 501c Tech is a nonprofit that specializes in providing technology solutions to nonprofits. They help to build the capacity of nonprofits serving the common good by providing innovative, sustainable technology solutions. 501c Tech provides services such as managed IT support, cloud migrations, and IT consulting, and is an organizer and thought leader in the nonprofit IT community. They're also the local chapter of N10, if I have that correct. We want to thank you all for braving the weather and joining us. Because of the weather, I think this is going to be a little bit more of an intimate discussion. So we're going to have a robust group discussion about these issues after our great presenters share their information with you. Thanks. All right, all yours. Break the light.
Thank you, David. Thank you guys for having me here. I'll try to keep this brief and make it more conversational. But I think the topic at hand is one that essentially brought me to join Care2 about 7 months ago. I've been working for the past 5.5 years as a consultant, mostly for international NGOs who were trying to grow their support base in different countries around the world, mostly in North America, Europe, and to some extent Latin America. And I'd been using Care 2 as one of several vehicles to do that. And the more success my clients and partners had with Care 2 and other digital partners, the more I could see where things were going. And so for most of my few minutes this afternoon, I'd like to really say why I think it's a very positive future in terms of what both non-profits and specifically citizens who support them can use the internet to do. So maybe just to get started, do we have any X-File fans in the room today? So if I'd asked this question 10 or 12 years ago, I think many more hands would have gone up. But the reason I ask it today, recently they relaunched the series, and I read one review that struck me as quite relevant to what we're discussing here. It said that the magic from a decade ago is going to be very difficult to recreate in an era where there no longer really are dark corners, small villages and towns where nobody really knows what's going on. Thanks to the internet and thanks to the extent to which we're all connected, there's now much more scrutiny and much more willingness of citizens to draw attention to what previously was quite a local or parochial experience. And frankly, I think Care 2 can take some of the credit for that. So for example, if, as you have seen unfortunately many times, even in the last year, someone's driving in a small quiet road in rural Texas, is pulled over and receives treatment from law enforcement that, let's just say, falls short of what that citizen is entitled to expect. A number of years ago, her recourse, her opportunities to do something about that were essentially guarded by a series of gatekeepers. Now, she may have been able to go to the press, she may have been able to go to local authorities, but what people like her and people who support people like her who are trying to hold accountability can now do is step around the gatekeepers and connect with each other. And in our case, following what happened with Sandra Bland and following what happened with many other private citizens, we give members of the general public an opportunity to directly draw attention to what's going on, and to do that in real time, and to do that with amazing impact. And so when you think about what will the future look like, what the present already looks like for me and for our Care 2 team is essentially the rebirth of international solidarity. No longer is something that happens in rural Texas only going to be talked about there, or where I'm from, if it was something in Belfast or Dublin, or maybe some of our groups that are working in sub-Saharan Africa or in Latin America. Now, when there is an injustice, or when there is a violation against the environment, or when someone's human rights are callously disregarded, people have an opportunity not just to draw attention to what happened to them or what they saw happen to someone else, but to invite other people to join them in doing the same thing. This changes the game. I'll give you another quick example that makes the same point. You may remember Cecil the Lion from earlier in the year. Well, we had, within 4 days, over 1 million people sign a petition calling for, in this case, Zimbabwe to stop giving licenses to people like the gentleman from the US that decided for sport he would like to go into this country and game hunt this lion. So a number of years ago, before Care 2 and other groups like us were on the scene, someone like Ruth, who was the lady, the private citizen who started this petition, what were her choices when she found out what had happened to the lion? Her choice may have been to write a letter to the editor. Maybe it was even to invite a journalist to come and cover the story directly. Her choice last year in starting a petition with us was to draw attention within hours, not just of the press and of authorities, but of other private, concerned and outraged citizens saying, this has happened, this is wrong, but above all, we can do something about this. This is no longer just about observing what's happening, this is about changing what's happening. And so people have different views on, well, what does this mean? Does this mean that there's too much power now for private citizens, or are we unleashing a mob mentality? And one point I would like to stress is that this is an internal conversation that, at least at Care 2, we're very, very sensitive to. So in our case, we do have a social mission. This isn't simply about providing a platform where citizens are invited to talk about anything and everything in any tone or any manner that they choose. We do have standards, and if people are on the Care2 platform at least, drawing attention in an inappropriate or an insulting way, harassing people, or even breaking the law, those petitions are monitored and removed very quickly. But for people like Ruth, who saw what happened to that lion and saw the brazen audacity with which this guy thought, who's ever going to know? Who's ever going to do anything about it anyway? We can give her a platform to A, start a petition, B, support her in writing that petition, giving some advice and tips on what type of language and calls to action really move people, and we can then help her promote it. And I think in terms of the internet, one misconception that probably isn't in this room, but is very often out there, is that it's simply a big ocean of anyone and everyone. What that overlooks is we have the ability to micro-target people who already share values. So you're not just simply making noise and throwing it out there, you're crafting a message designed to move a very specific group, and then based on information that people who join our community as members provide, we can invite people who already share your values and who are likely to want to stand with you when you're deciding, where do I spend my resources? Who should I focus on? What type of language should I have? And so I think what's most exciting about this, both for citizens and for non-profits themselves, is that for the first time that I can remember, you simultaneously have the opportunity of scale. You can go internationally, but you can also micro-target. So in our case, the common denominator that brings people together is not geography, it's not ethnicity, it's not a confessional test, it's simply values. In our case, they're what you may call soft, small, progressive values, people who care about the environment, care about human rights, care about civil rights. But strategically, for non-profits, this changes the game. You know, previously when you're trying to grow your support base and you're trying to scale something up, the model was, what's the bullhorn? How do I find an ability to amplify the noise that my organization is trying to make? Now, over the past decade, we've refined a model that gives you the ability not just to speak to a very large number of people around the world, but to pinpoint exactly who are the people who are most likely to already be receptive to your message. Now, if you're a non-profit working with small resources, that's a game changer. That compared to putting an advert on a television station or taking out an editorial infomercial in an online or offline newspaper publication, it really is apples to oranges. In our case, you're not simply hoping that people hear, you're only engaging us on the basis that we guarantee you we will introduce and connect you to people who not only will hear and give you permission to talk to them thereafter, but that those people will already be pre-qualified in terms of their values to match your values. And so, thinking about what has this really been moving forward, I think if we consider the removal of the gatekeepers, the editorial team at the newspaper, the police complaints division that decide which complaints are heard, which aren't, which move forward, which don't, the media who have to decide what information is most likely to be attractive to our advertising partners, and based on that, which will we promote, which will we maybe give less promotion to. With the removal of having to ask permission from these people to get your message out, now the real question is, how strong is your message? And the other point I would like to make in terms of answering that question is, while this is a big opportunity for non-profits, it's also a big challenge. It's no good anymore simply to talk about your mission, to have boilerplate talking points. In fact, it's no good even simply to have information that you're able to provide. What's absolutely key now with the internet as a tool for connecting groups and individuals to other groups and individuals is to provide them opportunities to interact with that information. Can they comment on it? Can they take it and run with it? Is it a true partnership? Where are the interactive pathways? So in terms of our partners, and we've had over 2,000 of them in the last 10, 12 years, the groups who have had most success are not simply the groups that find a popular message, but the groups that, in promoting that message, give audiences who are going to receive it an opportunity to continue acting with them thereafter. So can you give your supporters an opportunity to share a petition or to share a call to action? Can you invite them to start more on your behalf? What tools can you give people? What digital tools can you share with people that will let them be your brand ambassadors, your fundraisers, your advocates, your grass tops, not just your grassroots? What we find at Care 2 is understanding that this is a two-way conversation, understanding that the audience doesn't just want to consume information, they now want to produce it, they want to criticize it, they want to decide how strong it was. That's moved us beyond simply working with non-profits for us to also working with brands. So just yesterday, to give one closing example, I started a new campaign with a group called Happy Egg. And Happy Egg, you may or may not have heard of them yet, but I can assure you by the end of the year you will. So what they're doing is, lots of people talk about free range. What does that mean? And like a lot of other brands and labels, who's really testing this? Is it accountable? Is it somebody just making something up? In the case of Happy Egg, they understand that Care 2 has a community of people who will vet claims, who will call BS on stuff that doesn't really cut the mustard. Now, in the case of their brand, they do have an authentic right to talk about what does and does not mean free range. So, for example, you may go into the supermarket and find that some eggs labelled free range are produced with hens who have 2 to 4 square feet to move in. Now, I don't know about you, but that doesn't sound like freedom to me. Happy Egg have a way of deciding which local farmers to partner with that's based on, are these truly free range experiences or not? What we've done in partnership with them is to provide a pledge opportunity where people who are already eating eggs, who are feeding eggs to their kids, who want to know that the eggs that their kids are getting in schools and in other local areas are free range, they can take this pledge saying, I will check the label based on these new criteria that Happy Egg have brought to my attention. And if it matches that, fine. If not, I'm going to call out people who are claiming to be free range but really aren't. Now, this is quite exciting because it means that previously big, huge institutions used to see non-profits in many ways as a threat, engaging with them as a danger, talking about their values as a way to potentially have someone call out where they're not coming through on claims of their own. But for brands that really are doing good work, sustainable energy companies, organic farming companies, groups that provide technology that helps citizens achieve social ends, they want citizens to talk about them. They want to be tested on, are your claims real? So when they come to us, they know they're coming to a community of over 34 million citizen activists. And those citizen activists will call them out if they're making claims they can't substantiate. But if they're making claims that do stand up, then those citizens will become ambassadors for them. This is no longer simply about growing market share and helping to grow who will consume their product. This is about starting a conversation that people will amplify on your behalf if they think you're telling the truth. So my final point just for conversation as the afternoon unfolds is, when we think about who will benefit and who will be threatened by the internet moving forward, I don't think it's about the size of the organisation. Big groups no longer have monopolies, that may be bad. Small groups have opportunities to create solid partnerships with people all over the world, that could be good. I think it's more complicated than that. I think what's really going to happen is people will call you out on whether you're telling the truth, but when you are telling the truth, if your values are clear and compelling and relevant to other people, groups like Care 2 can now connect you to people all over the world very quickly and in a way that those people, upon connecting with you, will take up the torch and talk on your behalf there afterwards. That's great. Thank you.
Want to take a few questions?
Sure. Maybe better if I sit down for the questions, but go ahead.
Any questions?
Oh, okay, that's cool. Thank you.
We have
Oh, yeah.
I'll moderate the question. Push the button next. Yes.
Hello,
us who you are.
I think you just push it once. Should do it. This one.
All right. Just a quick question. Nothing too deep. Jim Galvin from Affilius. So I see that the Care2 provides some nice online tools and facilities for creating petitions and stuff like that. Do you do partnerships? Is it possible for, do you have a ability in online for other organizations and other kinds, like some of your partners, especially your nonprofit partners that are representative of some of the causes that you're very active in? Do they have a way to integrate some of those facilities directly into their website as opposed to having to come to yours? And sort of a sub-question to that is all this accessible and does it work really well on mobile devices and mobile technologies, which I think in some areas of NGOs is kind of important? Thanks.
Sure, it's a very welcome question. So when I mentioned that we had about 2,000 partners, it's probably worth categorizing them in three ways. Most of them are either non-profits, political candidates who are running on values that our community would support, and commercial brands for good, whose products or services are a values match. And you're absolutely right. What's the point in simply connecting the audience with the group that they may support and leaving it at that? So what we try to do to take it a little bit further is think about the user pathway. If people are looking for a donation or a vote or somebody to buy a product, we can, after people have signed up either for a pledge or a petition, invite them on a next action page to consider either going directly to a partner site or experiencing a product that partner can display digitally there and then. In terms of the mobile optimization piece, it's a great question, not least because for nonprofits in particular, they're not all there yet. And so we will try to advise them on what type of content to use, how to share it, how we can format it for them in a way that it will be visible as clearly and as easy to use on a mobile platform as on a different type of platform. So before anybody starts with us, we have what's called an onboarding kind of needs analysis, where depending on where the partner's digital capacity already is, we'll meet them where they are. And based on that, very often we actually have to push back and say, look, this graphic may be beautiful, or this video may be really interesting, but consider the person on the bus that's going to give you 15 seconds on their smartphone. Is that going to be an optimal user experience? And so for us, we're always starting with the audience, what's the most positive experience for them, and then giving advice to partners based on that. Thank you.
Please push the button.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hello. Okay, so my name is Sanjay Jain. I work for a small company. We support a open source platform called CiviCRM. So organizations like Care2 and Change.org, as I understand it, you have the data is owned by you. And I was wondering if Care2 had any, was thinking about how it could work with platforms like CiviCRM, where the data is owned by the nonprofit and are able to use your platform at the same time.
So this is a very important question, and I do need to correct that slightly. So I can't speak to the other groups, but at Care2, the experience for partners is very much based on people who sign up are given the partner ownership of the data. And that's so important that when we share the data, that even has implications for what types of files we can create and to respect their privacy and make it clear that is their data. In our case, there's really two data ownership questions that are linked to the audience experience. One is, a lot of people may want to sign and show solidarity with an action, but they don't want their data to be shared. And they actually would resent it if that data was used by the organization there afterwards. So we make it very clear on the site that that's up to the user, that's up to the signer. They can opt in or opt out as they like, but if they do opt in, then it is very much encouraged to our partners that they will take that opportunity, that invitation, to communicate with that person there afterwards. I'm also happy to speak more about that offline, because there could be a partnership there.
I'd like to weigh in that too. I'm glad you bring that up. In my day job, I do web strategy consulting largely within the nonprofit community, and we're just starting to get our feet wet with Civi CRM. For people who might not know about Civi in the room, it's an open source CRM or constituent database or constituent relationship management database, and it's open source the way WordPress and Drupal are. It's built on either platforms. And it's a great tool, and it replaces a lot of previous CRM and database models that nonprofits used. What we're looking for, with the Grail we're looking for, there's a new trend towards social CRM, and there's a lot of tools like Nimble that integrate social media profiles into the DNA of a contact management system. We're working on integrating that into our Civi builds, and to be able to do that in Civi, so you would be able to have social streams as you slice and dice your membership. So I'm glad you brought that up. We've also moved ISOC DC's membership onto Civi CRM recently, so I'll probably talk to you after this as well. Thanks, man. Any other question? Andrew?
So, and I'm not sure. Oh, yeah, it works first time. Yeah. Okay, so we do a lot of work with people in the global north who are trying to connect in with people in the global south. Okay, and the model that you've got and what you've described sounds like it makes very, very good sense from a global north NGO and a global north company trying to get together, things like that. So, can you talk a little bit more about? I mean, there are 10 million NGOs around the world. Only a third of them have even a web presence at all. A huge number of them in the global south. It's easier and easier and easier to get these connections. We do a lot of work on the .ngo project, so that's part of why I know about these things. Talk to us about where you see the connection to the global south and how we can light that up to a much greater extent.
Okay, so this is one of my favorite topics. I'll try to keep this brief, but you may need to amputate my speaking time here, because this is, I think, where the future of nonprofit activism is going, not just fundraising. I'm going to be in Mexico in about 3 weeks having exactly this conversation, and one of the reasons Mexico is the destination is a lot of NGOs now, as you would know, are creating hubs where they want, whether it's in Mexico City or maybe in Rio, their entire presence in the South, particularly in Latin America, to be much more elevated than it's ever been before. And some of the things that have held that back have been resources, but there's also been a tendency for all of us in the global north to see the global south as a place to be helped, rather than a place that has its own contribution and leadership role and ability to set trends. And so where this is very exciting at CARE2, and forgive me for sounding like I'm kind of self-promoting our group here, but this is something we take a pride in doing well. We are now going to partners who are non-profits, partners who would like to partner with non-profits, and saying, something's happening here. We have, in places like Mexico, Brazil, Colombia, India, places where the middle class is growing very, very fast, tens of thousands of members. They are just as educated, just as articulate, just as keen to act as our members are in France, in Germany, in the United States. But people aren't inviting them. They aren't partnering them. What are we waiting for? And so I think from a digital perspective, even thinking about North and South, important as they are offline, can slow things down. Because the user experience that we've created, the profile of member who exists there, and the readiness and willingness to help that if you go on our membership in any of these global south countries, you'll see, is all set up for changing the game. And what does that change look like? I mean, I'll give you one quick example. Some of the human rights groups that we work with in Mexico, their own partners in the north assumed that messaging that worked in the north could simply be translated into Spanish and it would work just as well in the south. Huge mistake. One of the reasons we can prove it's a huge mistake is the types of comments and actions that our members in those countries are taking, even if the issues are similar, are very, very different. So this is now giving people an opportunity, not just who would like to support non-profits, but non-profits themselves, to say, get to know your audience, get to know them intimately. They're talking to you, but are you listening? So I think that the ability to integrate North and South has never been more available. But the need to do it has never been more urgent, because people in the South now are actually saying, we demand a role in this conversation. We have something to contribute to it. What are we waiting for? Does that make sense?
Great. With that, we're going to move on to our next presenters. We have Mark Noel and Mike Rafferty from 501c Tech. They're kind of our keynotes today. They're a great organization, and I'm very excited to have them here. Take it away, guys.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Well, we're really excited to be here. My name is Mark Noel, and I'm the Client Relations Manager at 501c Tech. And let's see, is this guy doing what we think? Yes. Good. So we're here to talk about the importance of IT stewardship in nonprofits and NGOs today. So just a little exercise. What would we do right now if the power went out? Like individually, anybody? Use the flashlight. Go home, probably, or go to work, go back to our offices, go find somewhere else to be. And this presentation would be over and we'd be done. We'd be out of business, in other words. So that's kind of part of the theme of what we're talking about today here, is that nonprofits have to treat IT and information systems like keeping the power bill on. Keeping the power bill paid, keeping the power on. So if you remember one thing today, remember this, that the success or failure of nonprofits, the success or failure of nonprofits rests on technology, and it's not a luxury. For every single organization anywhere, there is a key component of their business where they need to make sure that they have technology in place to execute it. Whether you have lots of paper processes or you're a really high-tech company, regardless, somewhere there is a critical piece that you have to have that revolves around technology. So our objective today is to share some of the challenges and the dynamics that surround technology in the nonprofit world, and identify some of the effective strategies that we've found to help remove IT obstacles for nonprofits so that they can get back to the work of doing what they're doing to help humanity and help the world at large. So who is 501c Tech? So our mission is to help build the capacity of nonprofits serving the common good by providing innovative and sustainable technology solutions. In a nutshell, we help the people help the people. So we've been providing IT support exclusively to other nonprofits, and we are a nonprofit ourselves. And we've been doing that since 1999. So we've really seen it grow and progress over the years. We're the only nonprofit in the DC metro area that does what we do. And there's a reason for that. Because IT is a tough business, and there's a lot of money to be made, and there's a lot of private interests out there that are wanting to make money off of organizations. Because it is a critical piece of their business, and they know that, it's something that you can definitely hold people hostage for quite a bit of money for. So we're here to shift that balance and connect nonprofits to the right solutions that help them achieve their mission. We aren't here to make money, and we act in the best interests of our clients. As you can imagine, with any nonprofit, your mission is kind of to put yourself out of business, in a way, if you think about it. If you're an anti-bullying organization, then your goal is to have no more bullying, and then you don't have a reason to exist, right? That's the idea. Get rid of starvation, get rid of the problems. So realistically, we know that IT is not going to go away as a problem. It is something that is always going to be a need, and it is a constant need. And that's something that we have to focus on. And so our goal is to transform technology from being an obstacle into an element that multiplies the efforts of nonprofits to achieve their mission. So what do we do? So we provide a total suite of services. We are a managed services provider, so that means that we will handle basically any kind of technology issue or consideration that you have. So we provide help desk support. We have a team of engineers that work with us here in DC. We also do strategic planning and consultation to give nonprofits the direction and help that they need to make the right choices. We also do project work to make implementations like cloud migrations and server implementations, different kinds of major changes to the infrastructure. We also manage vendor relationships and third parties, so we can act as a liaison and a translator between different technology providers and our end users, who are the nonprofits that we serve. We also engage with the nonprofit community to help them understand and grow and guide the actual community, doing things like this. We are community organizers for N10, the Nonprofit Technology Network here in DC, and we do a monthly happy hour and have a speaker come every month to bring people together and keep the conversation going. So moving on to some of the challenges that nonprofits are facing. It's ironic that there is a cycle of technology starvation in the nonprofit world, because we're here to help other people, but yet we can't help ourselves sometimes, or even get to the next thing, get to the next step where we actually have the resources we need and the technology that we need. And work becomes more inefficient or even impossible at times. We have people that we talk to that come to us and they're just like almost in tears because they have no way to do their jobs, they can't pay their people, etc., just because they can't get over basic obstacles. So one of the dynamics that creates this is what we call battered IT syndrome. This is where folks get so used to working with inadequate technology that they just accept it. They accept that their computer takes 20 minutes to boot up, or that their Outlook takes 5 minutes to start, or that they lose their data all the time. They just accept that, and they move on. And the culture is sort of stagnant, and this technology stagnation persists. Another key aspect to this is budgeting. Huge. We don't have money for IT. There's no money in the budget. We just can't make it a priority right now. You'll just have to make do. And we think that that's okay for organizations to operate like that when it's really crippling the organization from the inside out. It can really significantly impact them. We frequently also see organizations getting caught in analysis paralysis. So talking about what kind of technology solutions they want over and over and over, having very complex proposal processes, hiring consultants to hire consultants to think about what decision they could make. I'm not even kidding. I've seen multiple levels of the consultants, of which consultant should we hire, to hire a consultant, to hire a consultant. These are the kinds of analysis paralysis that goes on in nonprofits when we could be making a decision and moving forward to a solution that's going to help the organization move forward. Also, a fear of change. Human beings are naturally resistant to change, right? We're all resistant to change to some extent. But what really gets in our way is when organizations generate a culture of fear of change, and that happens through poor change management. So when people get burned enough times about the change process and implementing a new technology, they don't want to hear about a new technology. They don't even want to think about changing their process. They just kind of want to put their head in the sand and go back into their battered IT syndrome of doing it the really, really long way. But at least it's not going to be as painful as changing. So that's something these are all fundamental challenges that we work to mitigate and help to resolve. So what are some of the strategies that we're using to do this? IT infrastructure is not free. Budget for it. Period. So we budget for occupancy expenses, rent, the power bill, the water bill, all kinds of things. But many organizations don't give the same focus to IT expenditures. They think that this is somehow an option. This is a nice to have. Or that, as long as somebody's got a computer in front of them, that's good enough. That's not the case. This is something that is very, very important and is as important as keeping on the lights. So for example, speaking about workstations, so like just as simple as having a computer, a machine, and a tool in front of you. If I can work at my desk, I can put my computer on the ground, I can go out in the hallway, I can go down the street to the coffee shop even if I have a laptop. I can do my work anywhere. those things, honestly, if the power were off in our building, I'd go down the street somewhere and I'd continue doing my work because I have a computer. But if you don't have that, you're out of business. So workstations last about 4 years on average. So we recommend that organizations replace about 25% of their workstations every year, which allows them to have a constant capital expenditure, or consistent capital expenditure every year. So they don't have to get to the end of 4 years and all of a sudden they have to replace their entire workstation fleet at once. So, and this is something that also happens in the grant cycle of nonprofits and NGOs, is that they get a huge windfall of money, they buy all new computers, and now 4 years down the road, everything is breaking and they have no way to replace it. They've built a business that needs those computers. They built computer labs, they built programs around the computer lab, and now they're in a situation where the computer lab is failing and they're scrambling around trying to find $30,000 so they can keep the computer lab going the next year. So not living hand to mouth on the grant cycle and communicating with your funders and your leadership that IT is a constant need. It's not something that's going to go away. It's not something that happens intermittently. It's something that is always a need, that we always have to do this. So, oops, what just happened here? Okay, sorry. Another thing is you may grow to the point where you need some sort of IT resource beyond your accidental techie. We like to call them the accidental techies. The folks who live in the organization or work in the organization and they know enough to be dangerous, but they don't know quite enough to be the expert that can guide the whole organization sometimes. And a lot of times, we get by with the accidental techies, and it's wonderful and it's really helpful. But that person, when they become a walking hat rack because they're wearing so many hats, at some point they can't support the organization anymore, and the organization has to make a decision to either hire an internal resource or outsource it in some way so that they can, so that someone can support the IT. The next piece that I want to talk about is change management. And so that's really about finding the right solution. When we're implementing different technology solutions, we really have to make sure that we actually pick the right one. Because there's a million of them out there and they have varying costs, varying use cases, and varying efficacy. And so how do we go about this in a way that's effective for organizations? So number one is listen to your users. Listen to your users and get buy-in. Your users are going to be the one using it. And no matter how exciting and sexy it is, and how fun it is, and how good the reporting is, that's good for the executives or whomever, do your users want to use it? Is it going to help them do their jobs? And that is a question that we forget all the time. When you get out of touch, and even consultants come in, or project managers come in, and they say, oh, this is what you need. And we're not talking to the users enough, and we have a problem when we go to actually use the tool. Make sure that you have alignment. So again, it kind of ties into business needs. Be platform agnostic. We all have different preferences of I want a Mac or I want a PC, etc. But Macs are very expensive computers. Do you need a Mac for your job? Do you really want to buy Macs for your entire organization? Is that necessary? Is that helpful? And that's what we have to do, is step back and put ourselves in the shoes of being selfless in a way, to think about what's good for the organization. Also, managing the change. Be ready to change yourself. If you're a part of the change management of an organization, be ready to change. Be an example of change, that you're interested in moving on with a different technology. You're looking forward to the technology, and you can set sort of the tone for the organization that will create a culture where people are more readily adopting the technology that you're presenting to them. Also, set expectations. So if you have expectations about how the technology is going to work, what it's going to do, how much time it's going to take, that maybe there's going to be a little bit of a rough period here or there. Set those expectations. It's not all, roses and Skittles. Sometimes it's something that does take a little bit of a hurdle to go through. So set the expectations that they need to be set so that you don't fail people's expectations. And training. Train people on how to use the systems that you have so that they're ready to move forward and actually make good use of the systems in place. That's a key component that we sometimes forget. And that really means engaging with your users, engaging with your organization, and utilizing the resources available to you. So that's my part here. I'm going to turn it over to our VP of Technology, Mike Raftery, to talk about cloud solutions.
Hello, everybody. My name is Mike Raftery. As Mark said, I'm the Vice President of Technology Services for 501c Tech. I've been in the IT support industry for 20 plus years. I blame my gray hair on that, although I don't know if that's actually accurate or not. So Mark had a lot of very good points about nonprofit technology. I kind of want to focus a little bit more on the finding the right solution. There's a whole segment of solution out there available to nonprofits, and they're cloud-based solutions. And I want to talk a little bit about that and dig a little bit into that from a technology standpoint. So why do cloud services make sense for nonprofits? There's a lot of benefit to it, a lot of cost benefit, a lot of benefits. So I'm going to kind of hit some of the highlights here. Mobility. So teleworking in the nonprofit sector has grown significantly over the past few years, and it's going to continue to do that. It's a benefit you can offer to people. When you look at job listings now, you see geography is no longer an obstacle for people. You can be anywhere. You can work anywhere that you want. You don't necessarily have to be in the same city as the headquarters. So cloud solutions kind of help you bridge that gap. Offers a lot more flexibility for remote workers, remote offices, for you to work in other areas. Data security. So I found this fact from Exo survey of nonprofits, and I think it's very interesting and kind of telling. So 94% of nonprofits that moved to the cloud saw improvements in security. But surveyed, only 56% of them trust cloud providers to secure their data. So almost everybody who moved saw security improvements, but if you ask them before they moved, almost everybody says they don't trust the security. I'm going to come back to data security because I think it's the number one question that people are going to have, so I'm going to kind of focus on that in a minute. Business continuity. Mark kind of hit on it. So what if your power goes out? What if you don't have access to your office? When you're based in a cloud solution, that none of that impacts you anymore. You're not tied to an infrastructure that's in one location. You can move around. You can work from a coffee shop. If your power goes out, you kind of move around. You can be on your phone. You kind of have the ability to be connected from anywhere you are. Scalability. So once again, it's kind of that if you're adding offices, if you want to expand into a new location, if you want to add users, instead of having to go possibly buy new equipment or buy a new server because your server's at capacity, now you need more space. And cloud solutions, all that infrastructure is taken care of for you. So you basically are just adding users or adding the resources that you need. You don't have to have a huge capital expense for adding equipment and hardware costs. So those are kind of the highlights. So once again, I want to touch on this because this is everybody's big concern with the cloud. Is my data secure? So my response to this for a lot of the conversations that I have about this is, what do you do now? What is your security now? Do you have a specific budget for security? Do you have your physical equipment locked up? Are you doing vulnerability tests? If you have a data breach, would you know it? What would you do about it? All these are questions. I recently spoke to a client that we were offering some help to, and this was a question they had for me about cloud solutions was, is my data secure? And when I asked them where their data lives now, it's basically on each individual's workstation being backed up to an external hard drive. And my response to that is, you don't need to worry about cloud security, you need to worry about your own security here. Like if somebody just walks off the hard drive, they have all of your data. Who has physical access to your space? There's all these questions that kind of answer, and honestly the cloud companies, the cloud services have thought of this, and that's what their business is, so they've kind of addressed a lot of these. So the next point is, don't confuse control with security. I think a lot of people make this mistake. Just because you control something or you have it at your fingertips doesn't make it secure. Those are two different things. So if you have all of your money stuffed in your mattress at home, you have control of that money. You don't have security. You put your money in the bank because they're providing the security for you. Cloud services are very similar to that. You're entrusting them with your data. The other important topic that I think there's a lot of media out there and a lot of talk about some of this stuff. Enterprise level cloud solutions are different than personal level cloud solutions. So when you read all this stuff about Google aggregating data and what do they do with it and all that stuff, what they're talking about is personal Gmail. Yeah, so on your personal Gmail, that's why you get custom ads. They're scanning for keywords, they're doing all that stuff. When you're working on the enterprise level, they don't do that. It's ad-free, you don't do it. So the important thing to remember here is that a lot of these larger companies are offering a non-profit or NGO kind of service, but most of their clients are paying for this service. So they have a vested interest in making sure it's working and making sure the uptime is there and making sure the security is there. We were missing something there. So where in the cloud? So while there's a million cloud solutions out there, these are some of the ones that we kind of find we land on the most. Google Apps for Nonprofits and Microsoft Office 365 for mail, documents, possibly some SharePoint, communicator, like interoffice communications. QuickBooks we see that a lot in nonprofits. They have an online version as well. Salesforce, obviously for CRM, Box for documents, and Mozy for backups. So we see, these are the solutions we see the most. Once again, I think Mark kind of touched on it, is platform agnostic. You want the right solution. If you're not in the right solution, you're not going to get the adoption that you need. You're not going to get the processes that you need to kind of go along with it. But these are the ones that we see the most and kind of make the most sense for us. So kind of just to wrap up with and hitting some of the points that Mark had was, technology is not a luxury. I mean, you just can't function without it. You can't have a functioning organization or business without technology. It's no longer something that you can go without or kind of push to the back burner. It's a vital part of program and mission, and it's important to dedicate the appropriate time, money, and resources to it. I'm still shocked we have this conversation as much as we do, where people just don't see the value of IT, but at the same time, you honestly cannot function in this business society anymore without it. I don't know how you would possibly go about it. So the other point to drive home that kind of Mark had was technology costs money. That's the reality. That is a fact. I can't take that away. I wish I could. I wish I could make everything free. But with the right planning and the right strategic thinking and looking for the right solutions, you can minimize the cost and maximize your spend. So you're basically trying to spend wisely so that you get the best possible solution for the amount of money that you want to spend. Once again, this also ties into why cloud solutions are great, because a lot of them for nonprofits are free to very low cost. Every one of the cloud providers that I had up there has a nonprofit program. Office 365, free for nonprofits. Google Apps, free for nonprofits. Box has a 50% discount for nonprofits. Salesforce has starter packs and then a discount. So it's all out there. So it's about spending your money correctly, just spending it wisely. But it's going to cost money, so I wish I could take that away. So the other thing is, with those investments, with those time investments, with those resource investments, with those money investments, that's going to come back to you. When you find the right solution for your organization, it's going to come back to you in productivity, morale, adoption, and mission delivery. Ultimately, that's what you're actually after. Is you want technology to be just something that is there. You don't have to think about. It's functioning. Your people are out there doing what they need to do to provide your mission. If every time they go out they can't connect or they're having trouble accessing data, it's slowing your mission down. So that's all we had. I wanted to thank Pathfinder and Internet Society for having us. We're available for questions if anybody has questions.
I think we're going to do one big Q&A after Roshani's.
Yeah, sounds good. Perfect.
And we can group these two things together so we can kind of group mission and process together in a really cool discussion after.
Okay.
Thanks so much, everyone. Before I get started, I wanted to kind of get a show of hands in terms of how many folks have heard of mHealth. We have quite a few folks in the room. For the folks who've heard of mHealth, anybody want to volunteer to share how they would define it or what they think it is? Any brave volunteers? I think I saw one hand. Would you like to give it a shot? No. Okay. What about here? Okay. Well, we will kind of go into that in the presentation. My name is Roshni Kotari, and I know we have some folks here, but I'm going to talk to you all a little bit about D-Tree International and the work that they're doing around mobile health technology. So we're moving from the cloud work that the 501c tech folks were talking about to more work on around mobile health. So the mobile trends around the world are pretty amazing. As you probably know, mobile technology is kind of quite far ahead in terms of how it's being used in developing countries. In some ways, they're kind of leapfrogging in terms of how technology is being used. But there's a huge kind of uptake in terms of mobile health, in terms of how people are using it creatively in developing countries. So besides just mobile health, there's a lot of trends in terms of how people are using it to connect. I'm not sure why it keeps moving before. Okay, it's kind of automatic. But you may have also heard about a trend that's related to mobile money in terms of transferring funds.
Every time you click it.
Yeah, but I wasn't even clicking it.
Okay, hold on.
So while we're trying to figure this out, so even in terms of the leapfrogging that we talked about for mobile health, there's a similar leapfrogging that's happening when it comes to banking and mobile money as
You're
well.
back to manual.
So,
Just scroll down.
okay. So mobile technology has a pretty huge impact in terms of social development in a lot of developing countries as well. There's a lot of new services and apps being developed. In terms of the mobile technology, so if you take out your mobile phone, and many of you all have it in front of you, you'll notice that you can use it for voice and texting, of course. You can also use it to run programs, store data, take photos, navigation. So we want to use this technology that's native to mobile phones and kind of apply it to health technology. So for example, for health components, we look at client education and behavior, tracking vital statistics, data collection reporting, electronic health records, and quite a few other things that we can look at in terms of using mobile for health systems, not just apps. So this is a really good slide to give you an overview of how this works. So you have clinical protocols, which I will get into in a minute, that connect with a performance report, and you can kind of track over time how patients are progressing. You can also use it to refer patients to health facilities as well. So D-Tree International, D stands for Decision Tree, and it really focuses on providing support tools to frontline health workers, primarily in Africa, in Tanzania, in Malawi. So we design, test, and deploy applications. We work closely with ministries of health and other health NGOs as well, such as Save the Children and Pathfinder and a few other NGOs. So the primary focus is on maternal and child health and also chronic disease. So what exactly do we focus on in terms of mobile health? We develop clinical protocols that enable better quality care. We design software that can scale up as well and focus on electronic patient record to improve care and provide information. So the biggest challenges that we have seen, and you'll kind of get an understanding of what I'm talking about once I start going into the specific projects. But the biggest kind of challenges that we're seeing is that there's a huge shortage of doctors, midwives in developing countries in terms of providing effective health care. The healthcare workers that are there, they have a very heavy client load. There's limited training provided to them. There's limited financial resources. And the key thing is, in the past, they were using primarily paper to document what they were doing. And now they're starting to use mobile phones to track what they're doing and track their patients. So a really good case study is from the work that we're doing in Malawi. This is a community case management project that we have. So there are health surveillance assistants who are community health workers who do not always follow the guidelines in terms of danger signs that they see when they see health patients. They're also not able to provide correct referrals when there's a need. So what the health workers are doing is using the mobile technology to identify patients that are at risk so they can refer them, they can make sure that they have the correct medicine. And the protocol is basically a decision tree. So it asks the health workers, for example, this is a really good kind of a screenshot. So you can see, how long has the child has had a fever, what kind of medicine have they been taking, and then you can track this over time. So they can do this right on their phone. Now, the way this technology works is they do not need to be connected to the internet while they're entering the data. They store the data on their phone, and then when they're back at their facility or in a place where there is an internet connection, then they sync with the database. So this is how the health surveillance assistance kind of goes through the protocol. So does the child have a cough? How long has the child had a cough? Does the child have diarrhea? Is the child vomiting? So depending on how the health worker answers these questions, then they're given a way to respond to the situation. They can also use the phone for time measurement, so they can see, how many breaths per minute the child is taking. So depending on how they answer the questions, they're either they can be given a referral to a health facility that's nearby or home treatment. So the tool itself helps the community health worker decide which is going to be the best way to address the issue. This also allows them to track vaccinations over time. And the data is available both to the health worker but also to their supervisors, so they can see over time what information they're collecting from patients. This has to do with medicine. So each health worker has a certain amount of medication that they can prescribe to their patients, so they can keep track of how much supply they have and when they need to refill. And this is just a screenshot of the dashboard that their managers can see over in terms of tracking all the patients. So some of the lessons learned. Technology is definitely changing very quickly, and we have to work with the health workers to kind of refine the apps, make sure the questions that are being asked are in local languages as well. And we need to make sure that the applications that we're creating for them support them effectively. So there is a lot of work that we do in developing the apps to make sure that they're relevant. I know we have limited time, so I'm going to kind of skip to another program that we have in Zanzibar that focuses on saving mothers' lives. And this basically provides transport to mothers to a healthcare facility. So the healthcare workers arrange for transportation to a healthcare facility to make sure that they get the treatment that they need. So they screen pregnant mothers and they identify danger signs, and they're able to create a community-based referral system, use mobile money for paying for the transport to the health facility, and then they do follow-up with the mothers after they give birth. So this gives you a sense of how many women are starting to use the health facilities for delivering their babies. So the results of this program has been really dramatic increase in facility delivery rates. So 82% of the women have identified for facility delivery is recommended. And facility delivery rate has increased from 30 to 67%. So I want to kind of go to the opportunities and threats. So the opportunity is definitely the smartphones are pretty low cost. We're definitely developing some partnerships with telecom and try to see how we can expand to this globally. And looking at point of care diagnostics, where we haven't started working in that area. And some of the threats or the challenges are the lack of intermediate funding and also power sources. We are experimenting with solar chargers in some areas as well. So these are some of our partners that we worked with, both the ministries of health, as I mentioned, some of the international NGOs as well in the field. So I just invite you all to connect with us. There are some great videos about our projects in the field. Connect with us on Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn as well. And I'm happy to answer other questions. Thank you.
Why don't you guys come up here, and Rory, why don't you guys come up here? Why don't we do an open Q&A for all of our panelists and try and morph it into a good group discussion about how we can use technology to make a better world. Any questions? Oh, come on. There you go.
Could you explain all these apps that you've done?
Yes.
How you did it? And we had somebody talk about advising on technology. How did you do all this?
So we're working, there's a different software out there that are used to create these apps. The software that we're using is called Mango Logic, and it allows our staff, field staff, to create the apps themselves. And so if you want to look up a little bit more about the actual software, the company that created it is called Things Prime. And I can tell you a little bit more about them afterwards as well. There's also another company called Dimagi, D-I-M-A-G-I, and they also have another software called ComCare that also allows international health NGOs to create health protocols. So there's definitely several different technologies out there that allow individuals who are working in the field to create their own apps per se. So it's not you can actually input the questions and the responses, and based on the responses, what recommendations. So the field staff can actually do that. And we're working a lot with the field staff and also the community health workers to make sure that software is relevant.
Hello. Okay, there we go. Thank you, Jim Galvin from Affiliates. So I have a number of questions, but if anyone else wants to ask, please stand up at a mic and I'll step to the back of the line here after each. But a question first for Rashani here. You talked about how when you have the patient record process, you can do that offline. So you seem to suggest that you can react to entering all the data and gathering that with the patient. But at the same time, you have a decision tree which helps them do analysis and determining what kind of conditions that a patient might have. Does that work offline too, or is that only work when you have an internet connection?
It's a very good question. No, it works offline.
So
that data is actually programmed into the phone. So when they're with a patient, they'll select the answers to the questions, and they won't need to be connected at that time.
So they have a full database down on their phones?
Yes, exactly. They have a full database on their phone.
Okay, thanks. I'll defer over here and ask my next question after you.
My name's Patrick. Currently a freelance writer, but before that I was a researcher at the Open Tech Institute at New America. Question is for D-Tree and 501c Tech. Talk about the importance of training to technology and nonprofits. I wonder if you could explain sort of what the training regime is like for a field health volunteer before they use and start using the device? And then also for 501c Tech, what would be your, excuse me, what would be your sort of ideal scenario in terms of like a nonprofit training their staff as they adopt new technologies? Like what would that training look like?
Why don't you start? Go ahead.
You're gonna, okay, so as far as training nonprofits, so depending on, we really try to build it into our change management process for. We try to build it into our change management process, like, so it's actually even part of like the project itself. So we actually build time into it so that we actually scope out what kind of information the end users are going to need to be able to use the technology appropriately. So it really, I think making your training specific and focused is obviously very important. And doing it live and having people in the room where they have an opportunity to ask questions instead of just providing static documentation, where they just have a manual that they take back or they get an email that they completely ignore from their boss or HR and they say, oh, okay, great, and they put it in the trash. So making an opportunity for people to actually have training live, like even when we just onboard a new client and we're saying, how do you work with us? Like, how do you submit requests, et cetera? Like, I make a point of going out to every client and talking with them in person, making it accessible with a webinar as well, so that if someone's not there, that they can get like online on GoToMeeting and see what's happening, and they can see me and we can talk. And that personal connection really makes a big difference when you're trying to do the trainings. It's kind of a general question, so it's sort of a generalized answer, but.
Yeah, and at D-Tree, we definitely do a lot of field training. So we just did a training with community health workers in Zanzibar that are part of the Saving Women's Lives program. So, before we start working with the health workers, we don't just give them the phone because it's tough for them to understand how it's going to work. But then I think the training is great, but it's still limited. And so we always do follow-ups. We also do training for kind of intermediary staff, so some of their supervisors, and then also training for the international NGOs that we're partnering with. So I think there's different levels of training, but then there's also follow-up that we do to make sure that people know how to use the technology.
Jim.
Thank you. So this question is probably mostly for 501c Tech folks and Mike Rafferty, but anyone who wants to answer would be welcome. So I like your analogy about cloud services, where clearly I think the problem is that people don't appreciate that they have security problems to begin with. Right. They think they get security and or control, and so there's this great fear of the cloud. But there's one comment that I want to make that I didn't hear you make, and I wondered, I'm sure that this is foremost in your minds, and I wondered how this fits with your interactions with other nonprofits. The issue with cloud services is your threat model is different. It's not that you don't get security, you're really trading different kinds of security. I mean, obviously organizations that have all of their information, data, infrastructure, their laptops and stuff, locally, in their own hands, in their own offices or whatever, you do get a certain amount of security out of that physical control, right? And you get some features. And the only thing that happens when you move to the cloud, and this is what people often don't appreciate, is your threat model changes. It's not that you don't have security problems, but you have different security problems. And in particular, you commented about mobility being one of the things that you gain by moving to the cloud. But the critical threat model that changes is now you need probably a confidential communication path to those cloud services, to ensure that you still have the same services. So I'm wondering how that affects any of your interactions and what discussions or feedback you've gotten from other folks about that.
Sure. No, I agree with you. I think there's definitely some different threat models. Some of them are similar. I mean, if somebody gets a hold of a password, whether it's internal or on a cloud, your system's compromised at that point. So for us, and there's certain controls. It depends on, once again, for us, there's a lot of variables, sensitivity of data, that kind of stuff. We try to put, even on the cloud services, it doesn't, just because they're taking care of kind of the infrastructure security, it doesn't absolve you of responsibility of protecting your own data to a certain point. So if that's two-factor authentication or just how people are accessing it. The policies that go along with that become very different. I agree with that 100%. You kind of have to modify your tech policies around that. Sometimes it's controlling the data. You know, one issue we've kind of run into in the past is kind of when you get that mobility, it gets a little tougher sometimes to wrangle the data. If you don't have your stuff set up correctly, if you haven't taken the time to kind of map it out correctly, what you could end up with is this subset of data that exists in 20 different places, and now you have no idea who has access to it or whatever. So we try to be very thoughtful and very conscientious when we're planning that stuff to make sure the policies match for A, and also just to, once again, it doesn't absolve a security component of your own data. It's just we're relying on the cloud services for kind of that peripheral, you know, firewall, like vulnerability penetration stuff. But you still have a certain responsibility of your own data to kind of protect that, and it doesn't go away with cloud services. It's the same type of protections you'd want if you had the data internal.
And I have one other question, but I'll defer to the gentleman behind me first and then come back.
I don't know what the queue is.
Thanks. My name is Drew Dvorak. First of all, I'm really glad to see this mix of things here because it enables us to get really down to the internet capacity for building good. I have a question which I think different aspects of it reach each of you in different ways. My base question for Roshani is: have you considered in your approach using apps for dumb phones? The reason I ask that is because you mentioned, first of all, that you can't just give somebody a smartphone in a lot of these places because they don't understand it well. A lot of the reason is because the dumb phones are still in use in a lot of places like that because of literacy problems, even among some of the people that may be serving as first-line health caregivers, and B, because you can't run an iPhone over with a truck and pick it up and use it. But there are literally phones we all know of that's been done to. And you know, and I mention that because I get back to listening to Mark and Mike talk about starting with the user. What does the user want to use? What's that going to be most effective? And then also, Rory, if I say your name, you said something very important too when you were addressing Andrew's question, is the opportunity here to become more engaged in getting that help from. You've got the smartphone apps altogether, but getting that help from somebody locally. For instance, there are several small outfits I know of in India right now that are looking for investment in developing dumb phones and whatnot. That could be a new partnership or something. I'll stop with that, but I just wanted to get that out there for all three. You see what it inspires.
I think they were using dumb phones. I just recently started with D-Tree International, so, but from what I understand is they were using dumb phones before, quote unquote dumb phones, Java based phones, but now they're using Android primarily for most of their projects. Yeah.
I think you hit kind of a couple of important things there for me, which is it kind of prompts me to think about the interconnectivity of everything, right? So if you don't have internet connection, how many of these services for you kind of get chopped? If you don't have proper training, how does that affect your adoption? Like all these pieces for us, that's kind of that strategic piece for us is trying to map all these out and put all these pieces together so that you're delivering the service or the technology for your users that they need. At the same time, you're getting the adoption that you need, you're getting the policies in place that you need, and you're getting the connectivity that you need. Honestly, it's, I think it's a good tie into what we're all talking about here is without the internet, without that connectivity, we lose a lot of our solution set. It goes away for us. So that's a very important piece, and I think that's a piece that's going to continue, as you especially expand out the globe. That's a very, a piece that needs work, honestly, and it'll get better as time goes on, I hope.
Add in what I think is awesome is I forgot to mention, I'm not sure technically what the capacity would be, but my
Yeah, absolutely.
then you enable yourself from using things slower, transmission time.
Yeah, absolutely. That's good. That's a good point.
So I would just add to that, if we agree that the general trend is that the barrier to participation in technology is lower than ever, including in the developing world, and consequently more people are connected than ever before, it also creates a new type of, if not problem, certainly something to think about, which is as you invite more and more people to use a platform, to create content, to join the conversation, to what extent are you responsible for what they do, what they say, what they claim? And at least in our case, it's something we take very, very seriously because, as I said, we are a values-based organisation, and so if there's a conflict between what a private citizen has said or done on the platform with our values, we feel the need to act on that. I think it is relevant to any organisation that wants to partner with external groups, whether they be individuals or broader institutions. And so, without getting into the legal side of it in terms of what are the terms of use that you would advise and to what extent do you take responsibility, I think it is important to create an ethos, to make it clear that the spirit of what you're trying to do is just as important as the legal terms with which you're trying to do it. And that kind of creates a filter where certain people will feel, yes, this is the right community, this is the right environment for me, and hopefully other people will realise that this is not the right one for me. So there is a balance to be struck there, but the value of values, the value of an ethos is, I think, a huge asset as communities of users become bigger than ever before.
Okay, we're just about out of time. We have time for one more question, but there are two, so we're going to take them both at once and let the panel field them both at the same time. First, three questions. You had a question too, didn't you? Okay.
Okay, there we go. So just quickly following up again on the issue of, threat models. This is really for Mike Rafferty. So you made the comment about business continuity and data scaling. You sort of get those features from cloud services. But the thing that struck me is, again, cloud services, they might provide you simplified solutions to business continuity in particular, but that doesn't take away from the fact that you do need a disaster recovery plan. They don't automatically move your data from one place to another if your virtual machine goes down and those kinds of things. You do need to worry about that kind of stuff and have a.
I agree. Kind of the same with the threat models. It's still wherever it lives, it's still your data, and you still have a certain obligation and responsibility to protect that data in the best way you can. I think kind of the same as threat models. I think the cloud solutions maybe change how you do that. It depends on the cloud solution that you're working in, how much redundancy they have built in. For me, it is. I agree with you. It varies, honestly, once again, depending on sensitivity data, how much data stuff. Sometimes we back up cloud solutions, sometimes we don't. Sometimes we rely on their redundancy. Sometimes we have another set of backups running that kind of pull that data and put it someplace else just for protection's sake. But no, I agree. None of the cloud, once again, for me, it's just on-prem or in cloud, that your responsibility to your data and to your security and to your backups doesn't necessarily change. It's just where you're continuing to put the data. So for us, what we're after is that redundancy. I don't want to have to buy 10 servers to move those virtual machines around in. I want Microsoft to do that, or I want Google to do that. I don't want to have to buy, that data center presence on the West Coast in case the East Coast goes down. I want Microsoft and Google to do that. So we kind of use all that infrastructure, hardware redundancy, but once again, it's still, they're just breaking off a piece for you to use. So it doesn't, your obligation continues for your organization to manage it and properly and to kind of make sure you have the right strategies and policies in place.
One more question?
All right, great. Last question. So I'm Bill Cunningham, Creative Investment Research. We launched our first website November 16th, 1995. So we've been looking forward to this panel for a very long time. My question concerns social return calculation. So what we do is we calculate financial and social return, and we've been doing that since 1991 to more accurately and correctly allocate assets. The reason you had the financial crisis is because the social return calculations were missing from all of those, right? So how do you calculate? Have you looked at calculating social return? Before you answer that question, David, great event. This is what I'm talking about with respect to ISOC being in a unique position in DC, where you can take advantage of the venue, the people, the human capital, right? And the other folks that come to support these types of events. So, social return.
Sure, maybe I could.
Yeah, this is probably more your areas.
So, I had this exact conversation with a trade union leader in Berlin last year, and he had a very interesting angle on it. His critique, not mine, but his critique of US unions is that they have failed to ask this question in the way that you just framed it, whereas he claims that in Germany they have successfully asked this question. So what's he trying to say? He's trying to say that if organizations only think about the value that they can create for their own members, they're immediately creating a danger of opponents outside of their membership. Whereas if organizations like, say, unions can also demonstrate the social impact of having success with whatever their charter is, then there will be a friendlier environment to operate in. There will be a natural positive bias in their favor as opposed to the alternative. And above all else, people will remember that they're there. He thinks that one of the great reasons that many organizations gradually wither and die is less to do with how successfully their operations work and more to do with, are people even paying attention to that value, or are they taking it for granted? So from a communications perspective, his prognosis on this is that if you want to think about it in branding terms, the key branding objective any organization has is to make sure that it's very clear to the broader environment or society within which it's operating that what would go wrong if that organization suddenly disappeared. What do people take for granted simply because that organization is there to provide it? And unless that connection between we're adding value not just for our own members but for the broader community, unless that value is clear, it's a branding fail and could ultimately have existential consequences for any group like that.
Anyone else? We're out of time for a formal discussion, but we have a good amount of time to stay in the room and have informal discussion. We were hoping everybody would kind of continue the conversation here informally. 501 Tech has a table here to provide you with more information. We're going to be hanging around a little bit, and there's a ton of food out there. Please eat some or grab some.
By the way, shameless plug, there's some little things back here for our N10 happy hour. We do it every month. So if you want to grab one, that link is good. We will change the link as for each month. So you can always come. They're free food and drink, great talk, kind of thing like this. So please enjoy.
Good to see you again.
Extraordinary.
I think we met at the interview.